King Charles had just told his son to proceed, and those 3 words on a Thursday evening phone call were the moment Camilla lost the only shield that had ever protected her. What sounded like a quiet family conversation had, in 72 hours, become the most decisive institutional shift the modern monarchy had ever seen behind closed doors. Before we go any further, take a moment to subscribe so you never miss the next royal investigation. Stories like this rarely end where they begin. But to understand why the king's voice had changed, we have to go back to the moment the countdown began. The call came just after 9 in the evening. Everyone who later heard about it agreed on one detail: it lasted less than 4 minutes. King Charles was at Clarence's house alone in the small sitting room he preferred over the grander staterooms when he dialed his son directly rather than routing the conversation through a private secretary, unusual enough that the one aide still in the building noticed. William answered on the second ring. He had been waiting. He would never admit that to anyone outside his own office. Charles did not open with pleasantries. No question about the grandchildren, no comment on the weather. The small verbal cushioning that usually preceded any difficult exchange between them was gone entirely. He simply said that he had reached his decision. "Proceed." Those were his exact words, according to the one source close enough to the room to have heard them repeated within the hour. "Proceed. Treat Camilla with dignity throughout the process and let nothing reach the public without his knowledge first." 3 requests. William agreed to 2 without hesitation. The third, control over what reached the press, and when he did not answer directly. He said only that he understood his father's wishes. Understanding is not the same as promising, and anyone who has spent time in that world knows the gap between the two is never accidental. What makes this moment remarkable isn't the decision itself, extraordinary as it was. It's the tone. Those who knew Charles well have said for years that his voice carries a particular register when he is troubled, but resolved a flatness that replaces his usual warmth. That was the voice William heard down the line. Not anger, not sorrow exactly. Something closer to exhaustion mixed with certainty, the sound of a man who has run out of arguments he still believes in. And that should stop you here, because a king does not run out of arguments easily. Charles had spent 30 years defending his marriage to Camilla against a public that once cast her as the villain of the most scrutinized love story in modern royal history. He fought that fight when it was genuinely dangerous to his own standing, when courtiers advised him privately that the relationship could cost him the throne. He didn't fold then. So what changed? What made a man who had weathered 3 decades of hostility on her behalf finally say the word "proceed" to the one person capable of dismantling what remained of her position? The answer sits inside a window of exactly 72 hours, a period so tightly bounded that palace insiders now refer to it half in disbelief as the countdown. Whatever happened during those 3 days did something decades of public criticism never managed. It moved Charles from protector to bystander. It did so without a single public statement, without a leak to any newspaper, entirely inside rooms nobody outside the family will ever see. William, for his part, did not celebrate. 2 people who spoke with him in the hours afterward independently described the same detail worth noting, because unrelated sources rarely converge on identical images by accident. He closed a folder that had been sitting open on his desk, set it to one side. The way a man closes a file after a difficult meeting, not the way he closes one after winning something. No triumph in the gesture. If anything, those close to him say he seemed subdued, a man absorbing the weight of what had just been handed to him rather than enjoying it. That distinction matters because everything that follows could easily be mistaken for ambition. A son maneuvering against a stepmother he never fully accepted. It wasn't. That reading misses what actually drove him into that room in the first place, and misses why Charles, of all people, ultimately agreed with him rather than fighting him. Something specific happened in those 72 hours. A document surfaced. A conversation took place that nobody in the family expected. By the time it was finished, the king, who had defended his wife's place in the monarchy for 3 decades, no longer had the ground to stand on that he once did. But to understand what tipped the balance so completely, you have to see how each of them reacted once the call ended, because the emotional aftermath tells you more than the decision itself ever could. Camilla did not hear the outcome from her husband. She heard it from her deputy private secretary, who received a brief message from the king's office roughly 40 minutes after the call ended.